Have you ever faced a moment when your heart was racing, your legs trembling, and every instinct screamed, impossible? That's exactly where our story begins, on a dark night 2,000 years ago, when one man's step of faith would become a timeless lesson about trust and courage. The Sea of Galilee, a massive freshwater lake in ancient Israel, was notorious for its sudden, violent storms. Jewish fishermen who worked these waters knew its moods intimately, from mere calm to raging tempest in minutes. It was on these very waters that one of the most extraordinary events in biblical history took place. The day had been exhausting. Jesus had just finished feeding 5,000 people with only 5 loaves and 2 fish. As evening approached, he instructed his disciples to take their boat to the other side of the lake while he went up a mountain alone to pray. The disciples, many of them experienced fishermen, set out across the familiar waters. But this night would be different from any other they had experienced. As darkness fell, a fierce storm arose. The wind howled across the water, waves crashed against their small fishing boat, and the disciples struggled against the elements. These were not amateur sailors, they were seasoned fishermen who had spent their lives on these waters. Yet even they were frightened by the ferocity of this storm. Hours passed as they battled the waves. It was now the 4th watch of the night, somewhere between 3 and 6 in the morning. The disciples were exhausted, their muscles aching from fighting the wind and waves. Then, through the darkness and spray, they saw something that made their hearts stop. A figure was moving across the water toward them, walking on the surface as if it was solid ground. Panic gripped them. "It's a ghost," they cried out in terror. The figure drew closer and a familiar voice cut through the howling wind. "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." It was Jesus, doing what seemed impossible, walking on the stormy sea. Peter, always the bold one among the disciples, found his voice. "Lord, if it's really you," he called out, "tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus' response was simple but profound, "Come." Imagine that moment. The boat is pitching in the waves. The wind is whipping spray across the surface. And Peter, in an act of extraordinary faith, swings his legs over the side of the boat. His fellow disciples watch in amazement as he steps onto the surface of the water. For a few incredible moments, Peter does the impossible. He walks on water, his eyes fixed on Jesus. Each step defies natural law, each moment a testament to the power of faith. But then something changes. Peter becomes aware of the wind howling around him. He notices the waves beneath his feet. Fear creeps in, and in that instant he begins to sink. "Lord, save me," Peter cries out as the water begins to swallow him. Immediately, Jesus reaches out and catches him. "You have little faith," Jesus says, "why did you doubt?" Together they climb into the boat, and instantly the wind dies down. The disciples, who had watched this entire scene unfold, were awestruck. They had just witnessed something that challenged everything they understood about the natural world. "Truly you are the Son of God," they declared, their faith transformed by what they had seen. This story resonates across time because it speaks to universal human experiences. Like Peter, we all face moments when we're called to step out in faith, to do what seems impossible. We know the feeling of initial confidence followed by creeping doubt. We understand the paralysis that fear can bring. The Sea of Galilee still exists today, known now as Lake Kinneret. Its waters still churn with sudden storms, just as they did 2,000 years ago. Fishermen still cast their nets into its depths. But that night, something happened that transcended the natural order, something that continues to challenge and inspire people around the world. Peter's brief walk on water teaches us that faith isn't about the absence of fear, it's about taking action despite our fears. It shows us that even when we falter, divine help is just a prayer away. When Peter began to sink, he didn't try to swim, he called out to Jesus, who immediately reached out to save him. The story also reveals a profound truth about focus. When Peter kept his eyes on Jesus, he achieved the impossible. It was only when he became distracted by the storm around him that he began to sink. This mirrors our own experiences. When we focus on our problems rather than our source of strength, we often find ourselves overwhelmed. Perhaps most importantly, this account demonstrates that faith isn't static. It's a dynamic journey of trust, doubt, failure, and renewal. Peter's experience wasn't a failure, it was a stepping stone in his spiritual growth. He may have sunk, but he was also the only disciple who had the courage to step out of the boat. 2,000 years later, this story continues to challenge us. It asks us what boats we need to step out of, what storms we need to face, and whether we're willing to keep our eyes fixed on our source of strength when everything around us says impossible. It reminds us that sometimes the biggest miracles happen not when seas are parted, but when ordinary people take extraordinary steps of faith.